I'm through and through a loyal Conservative, I had geared myself up effectively to vote against a government whip and to vote for the SNP motion. And the fact that I was denied that opportunity last night, not just, I have to say, by what happened, but also the fact that the situation where the votes were actually just nodded through seemed to me a bit skew-whiff as well, and I raised that in my point of order, means that the whole ability of the House of Commons to send a message, as you say, has been completely hobbled, and that is a big issue.
And now one MP who was planning to vote for the SNP motion but then couldn't is Kit Malthouse, the Tory MP for North West Hampshire and former policing minister, who joins me now. Kit, you may have heard we were playing a clip of you, but I'm hoping I can get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So I guess first of all, then, your thoughts on what Lindsay Hoyle has just said there. Do you accept his apology and reasoning that he wanted open debate and to protect MPs? Have you faced threats?
So I have to confess, I haven't had any specific threats. I've had some unpleasant emails, but nothing that I would call a threat so far. I mean, look, Lindsay Hoyle, in my experience, is a good and honourable man, but I do think there are some quite serious questions that need to be answered about this situation before we can conclude about what we do next. I think there are questions about the conversation between Keir Starmer and Lindsay Hoyle, what was said, and therefore why the Speaker felt he needed to, effectively act against the advice of the Clerk of the House in producing this slightly Heath Robinson situation that we had last night. If the conversation was, do you know what, if you don't allow this, Mr. Speaker, you're putting my MPs in danger, then I do think that is quite a serious Rubicon that we've crossed, because there's a secondary question, which is about how the House deals with and reacts to threats to MPs' security. I gather there have been questions in the House this morning about the integrity of Parliament in the face of outside intimidation, and I do think there's a whole area of discussion there. And then there's a third area, which is about the ability of the minority parties to have their voice heard. I mean, one of the things that Penny Mordaunt said in the House this morning was that the government yesterday effectively was standing up for the opposition parties, for the minority party, the SNP in this particular instance, because effectively their opposition day, their opportunity to have their views heard on the floor of the House, was being hijacked by another party. And so I think there are a series of questions. And from my point of view, before we can reach any conclusion, I think the Procedure Committee of the House should institute an inquiry, call the various participants in those conversations and hear from them effectively under oath what it is they said and did.
I mean, we're going to be talking in our next item about MP security, and I think that's a very important point. But I know that, Kit, last night you wanted to vote for the SNP motion, and the actual vote, the point of the vote, seems to have been almost entirely drowned out by parliamentary procedure, calls for Lindsay Hoyle to lose his position, and generally, I mean, it feels like a very embarrassing day for British politics. How do you feel today? I mean, it feels like, we could have sent a message, and it didn't transpire.
Yeah, no, I completely, and that was my point of order, which you inadvertently played earlier, which was that I was keen to register a vote for a ceasefire. I spoke in the debate and called for one. I was in Israel and the West Bank and on the fringes of Gaza just last week, and saw for myself the futility of what is going on there. And I'd relayed that in my speech, and notwithstanding the fact that I'm through and through a loyal Conservative, I had geared myself up effectively to vote against a government whip and to vote for the SNP motion. And the fact that I was denied that opportunity last night, not just, I have to say, by what happened, but also the fact that the situation where the votes were actually just nodded through seemed to me a bit skew-whiff as well, and I raised that in my point of order, means that the whole ability of the House of Commons to send a message, as you say, has been completely hobbled, and that is a big issue, I think. I mean, people may say these votes on opposition motions are performative, but they say something about you as an individual MP to your electorate. And sometimes the votes that the government has to to take in the face of opposition motions are very difficult for us to explain. In fact, often those opposition motions are designed to cause difficulty for government MPs. And so I do think we need to bear that in mind, that, these backbench and opposition days are designed to flush out the views, I guess, of individual MPs so that they can explain it to their electorate if they need to. And that was what I was hoping to be able to register yesterday and was denied. I do think, though, there's a wider issue about this safety issue, because obviously, as a body of MPs, Conservative MPs do get a lot of abuse. I have to say, I feel very fortunate because I get nowhere near the abuse some of my colleagues do. Particularly, I have to say, female members of the House seem to get more than male members. And if the Speaker was trying to balance the safety of members, I don't know if there was a conversation that was had with SNP or other members about their safety in that vote as well. So this is why I'm keen for us to kind of untangle the issues last night, notwithstanding the fact that, as you say, we were debating an extremely important issue.
Yeah.
And I was hoping we were able to send a signal to the world about how the Commons felt about the carnage that's happening in Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, well, you said, votes like this give an opportunity for MPs to sort of speak directly to their constituents in terms of what they want to say about a specific issue. And also, as you've just said, it's a message to the world. And this is about an incredibly important, and catastrophic situation unfolding in Gaza at the moment. And the reality is that all the political parties played games yesterday. And I have to say, like, judging on the basis of our inbox here at Times Radio, people are really fed up about it.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. It was not an edifying evening. And as I say, my point of order was about the fundamental point at issue, which was about the vote and the message that we were going to send. Now I've been strongly of the view for some time. I authored and gathered signatures for a letter before Christmas calling for a ceasefire. And I've been strongly of that view for some time. And for me, the debate was an opportunity to advance that agenda. I have to say, though, Mariella, while you may be right about the different maneuvers that the parties made, we are really in a ridiculous battle of semantics here. Whether you're talking about a ceasefire, a truce, a pause, one that's sustainable or credible, there's all this sort of crazy language. And what I said in my speech was that I think the vast majority of the British people want three things. They want the violence to stop, they want the hostages to come home, and they want aid to flow in. And I was hoping that we would get a simple message from the House of Commons that is what the elected representatives of the British people desire, and that's what the government should therefore deliver.
And unfortunately, what we ended up seeing is parliamentary pantomime, really, and I think, it speaks very badly for us as a nation that that's how we would handle something that's of such global importance.
I agree.
And now we're caught up in a debate today about whether or not the Speaker will lose his job. I mean, what's your feeling on that? Do you think that's a distraction or important?
I think in many ways that's that's the wrong issue. And I'm hesitant because, I'll be accused of being party political on this, but I do think there's an issue for the Labour Party about how they behave, because we saw early on, you will have noticed that before we even got to the debate, Chris Bryant and other Labour members were filibustering, were creating time, points of order designed to create a delay, because there was obviously some kind of heated conversation going on between the Labour leadership and the Speaker.
Indeed, but Kit, I think that you're now falling prey to the very thing you said shouldn't be happening, which is that there was all kinds of bad behaviour, I think, on the part of almost everyone we witnessed in Parliament yesterday. So to just perpetuate that seems to me to distance us yet again from the issue that the motion was supposed to be about.
No, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying to you is that I think if we're going to have an inquiry into the steps that were taken, I think we need to start from the beginning. So we need to understand, was an order put out to Labour MPs to delay, right? How I'm perfectly happy for that inquiry to look at how the decision by the government to withdraw their motion was also taken and why, right? And I think before we can reach any decision about what the implications are of the House going forward, we need to look at the full picture of how the day was handled by each of the parties and why they did what they did.
Indeed, but meanwhile, I think the nation would like all concerned to focus on what was supposed to be voted on,
Yeah.
which was that motion. So ultimately, do you think Lindsay Hoyle will go, and then we can turn to the perhaps more important business of what's happening in Gaza, or do you think that this is, something that's going to carry on in a protracted way to be debated while nothing happens?
Well, I think two things. As I say, I think the vast majority of members will want to understand what's happened before they reach a conclusion. Some have signed this EDM, early day motion, expressing no confidence in him, as you said. I won't be signing that until I've seen, or tried to get to the bottom of what actually happened last night and why. But critically, you're right. This is a distraction from this issue, which is so important now, which is about reaching a situation of peace in Israel and Gaza. And I hope that, what the House can do now is focus on that and assisting the government in bringing those parties together along with the rest of the world to get into a much better place than they currently are. We do, as I said in my speech, we stand on the verge of this assault on Rafah with its 600,000 children. And to allow that to go through without us doing everything we can to prevent that carnage and to get those hostages home as quickly as possible would be unthinkable. And that is where we need to be focused, I think, while we deal with this, admittedly of a secondary issue, but still important for the future of the House, this issue into the future.
Kit Malthouse, Tory MP for North West Hampshire, thank you very much indeed for joining me.